Hello, everyone. Daniel King here. Very much looking forward to a conversation with Alison Pidgeon. She's the founder and CEO of Move Forward Counseling, which is an 80-plus employee practice in Pennsylvania. Do I have that right, Alison?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Alison, would love you to start out by telling the audience about how you got into the group practice journey.
Absolutely. I started out my career trained as a counselor and worked my way up through community mental health, was the director of an outpatient clinic, had two young children at the time and got super burned out. Actually ended up going to therapy, and the therapist said to me, "Why don't you start your own practice?" And I just was like, "Why don't I do that? Sounds like a great idea." So I started my own practice just with myself and really just wanted to do it just to have some more flexibility to be available to my family. And I really loved the business part of it, the entrepreneurship part of it, realized that I could accomplish my goal of kind of working myself out of the chair and increasing my income if I started hiring people. Started hiring therapists. This is back in 2015. And we grew the first 5 years to about 12 clinicians. And then at the beginning of 2020, we switched to W-2 employment. And then obviously the pandemic happened. And at that point, our growth just exploded. We just kept hiring to meet demand. And now today, a little over 10 years later, we have about 80 employees and 60 of those are clinicians. And we have multiple locations across Pennsylvania.
Fantastic. What keeps you going? I mean, a lot of practice owners don't get anywhere near that level. Why are you still doing this? Why are you still growing?
Yeah, I think when I started out, I just thought like, oh, I'll grow to 12 clinicians because that for a lot of practice owners is what feels manageable. Like you can kind of still do all the things and manage 12 people, right? So initially I was like, that seems like a good number. And then I'll be making even more than I was making in community mental health. Like I'll just, kind of stop there. And I got to that point and I was like, this is great. Like we're doing really great work for the community. The clinicians are happy. I've created this really great workplace culture. And I'm like, why not just keep doing more of this? And I think, too, for me, like, I'm one of those people who likes a challenge and I like the whole like problem solving aspect of building a business and innovating and trying new things. And so it just felt right to keep expanding. And so, yeah, so I think for me, it's really about showing that we can treat our staff really well and also give really excellent clinical care. Because I think in a lot of, mental health environments, there's very much like a unspoken understanding that the therapists have to be martyrs and work really hard and, have no work-life balance. Or there's, the other side of the coin, like because of regulations or whatever reason, there's things that aren't favorable for clients in the process as well. So I just thought like it would be great to prove that we can do both really well, it doesn't have to be an either or situation.
Talk to me about the how a little more here, because this is one of the classic challenges that group practice owners have. They want to pay their clinicians well enough that they stay and that they're motivated to do high quality work. And they need to have boundaries with their clinicians. So their clinicians are not taking so much margin away that the profit owner's work, the risk that the practice owner is taking is justified. So how were you able to strike that balance?
Yeah, I feel like it's constantly a work in progress. But what we figured out is that obviously there's a cap as to what you can pay clinicians to keep the business sustainable and keep it running. And we're pretty transparent with the therapists about, this is how much money comes into the practice and it gets divided out among these different, buckets. And we're able to pay you this percentage of what comes in. And so I think they have some understanding of that I'm not like over here, like rolling in gold coins. And then I think also for therapists, a lot of times what is really important to them. I mean, obviously they want to make good money to support their families, but the other piece that's really important is culture and making sure they're working in a place that is ethical, that is, following the laws of our profession, that they feel good about like the work that they're doing and how the clients are being treated, how they're being treated, the supervision and support they're getting. So I think that culture piece is huge. I've actually had therapists who were interviewing with us and they were actually making more working somewhere else, but the culture was so terrible. They were willing to leave and take a pay cut in order to work in a better culture.
Awesome, and makes very consistent with my experience as well. Clinicians tend to be sensitive souls, and so they're sensitive to the environment and the energy of the environment. And
Absolutely.
I'm curious how you can create an environment, how you're able to create a culture that is so attractive to them. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think for me, it really came from the beginning of looking, establishing our values as a practice. And then a lot of clinician owners do that, right? They're like, they learn let's establish these values for your practice. But then where people fall short is that they don't know exactly how to translate those values into like the everyday stuff that we do in the business. And so I think we did a really good job of putting structures in place and actually operating the business in accordance with our values. And so for me, that's the whole foundation. And so now we can even go back and point to like, we made this decision based on, this value or that type of thing. So I think that's my sort of guidepost.
Values can be extremely abstract and extremely easy to write on a website. Living by them is a whole other kettle of fish.
Yes.
So, how did you come up with those values? Was it a reflective process? Did you have conversations with staff? How did they emerge?
Yeah, I think what was interesting when I was going through the process, and this is obviously a long time ago now, but somebody had a mentor or someone of mine said, probably a lot of your values, your own personal values are the same values you would have in your business. And I found that to be true. And so I think, kind of those things that resonated with me about, how I want to treat people. And I thought a lot too about, if I was an employee in this practice, how would I want to be treated, knowing that I come from a background of, being a parent and being a more seasoned clinician who, wants a lot of autonomy and that kind of thing. So I kind of put myself in the shoes of if I was an employee in the business, how would I want to be treated?
I think there's a beautiful exercise for all of us. I do it periodically where I check in with myself and explore what is my worldview. And there's value in prioritizing certain things that are going to be most significant in the business. But I think personally, it's such a beautiful exercise to understand periodically, what is my worldview? Has it changed? And how can I build systems such that in my life in general, I'm really living by it? It's not an easy thing to do, and few people actually do it. But there is a feeling, I think, that you convey to people when you live that way, that this isn't arbitrary, that you are truly standing for something. And I think that can quickly help attract the right people and detract the wrong people.
Exactly. Yep.
So did you find in this process of sort of coming up with your values that in your interviews, when you're speaking to potential clinicians, those values are discussed consciously, or maybe they're an implicit part of your interview process?
Yes, that is a very intentional part of the interview process because we found that stating the values up front really helped to attract the right people, repel the wrong people. We have a value around diversity and inclusion, and I'm very clear about that, if you're not on board with this, you're not going to be a fit here. And it's just best if we, part ways now, obviously saying that in a very professional way. Yeah. So we have to be very clear about that to make sure we're getting people who are good fits. And I look at the interview process too, as they're interviewing us to see if we're a good fit just as much as we're interviewing them to see if they're a good fit. So I like to be as transparent as possible in that process so that they understand what our culture is like.
No interview process is perfect, but I'm imagining that you probably do a pretty good job of screening the right folks in and out with that approach.
We've learned a lot over the last many, many years of hiring. Yes.
Yeah. What has been the single most important learning about doing the interview process and achieving that outcome?
I think for me, what I realized was that people are going to say a lot about themselves in that interview process. And if there's like a little, I think in the beginning, maybe like a little red flag would come up and I'd be like, oh, it's fine. Just, they came 10 minutes late to the interview, no big deal, right? But then they're communicating all through that process exactly who they are and how they're going to be when they're an employee of yours. I really pay attention to those things and I will filter out people if there's, sort of a pattern of those little red flags popping up because I've gotten burned in the past from ignoring them. Yeah.
Yeah. The easiest thing in the world is to want to give people grace, and that's not necessarily a harmful instinct. And if you do notice patterns, then that starts to become data. Now we're not in the
Right.
territory of giving people grace. We're in the territory of kind of willful blindness.
Yes.
So you build a great culture, you're able to attract lots of clinicians, and now you decide to go from 12 to 60 clinicians. You go through this pandemic period where so many practices across the country experience a lot of growth, including yours. How long did it take to go from 12 to 60, and what was that journey like?
Yeah, that's a great question. How long did it take to me? So if that was 2020, maybe 2024, so 4 years. I would say really the big game changer for me during that time was hiring a COO.
Hmm.
So I looked for someone who really was good at all the things I was bad at or enjoyed doing all the things I didn't like to do. And so all the things I had kind of been procrastinating on, like she started and she's like, I like writing policy and procedure manuals. And I was like, thank goodness, because I have been putting off this task for a while. And so now here you go. So the year that she actually started in January, we doubled in revenue. So
Yeah.
that was a huge game changer. And I think just really building out a strong leadership team. And not necessarily, I think a lot of times when owners are looking to build out a leadership team, obviously they think like, oh, I want to hire somebody who already has leadership experience. But that wasn't our experience. We had a lot of people who wanted to become leaders, who had good instincts to be a leader, but had never really had the opportunity or been a leader in the past. So we hired those folks and kind of trained them internally, and we continue to do that. So we have a twice annual leadership retreat where we do training with our leaders because we feel like leadership training is never done. Having the right leaders in place makes all the difference. And, for many years, I would go on vacation and still be checking my email and, like checking in because I felt like I could totally unplug from keeping an eye on what was happening in the practice, and having those really trusted people in place and delegating lots of those things has enabled me to now go on vacation and not look at anything at all and not worry about it because I know they have it handled, which for someone who owns a business is like an incredible feeling.
On your leadership team, I see you've got a COO that you mentioned earlier, you've got a CMO, and a couple of clinical directors.
Hmm.
How did you land on those 5 people? And is that leadership team going to remain about the same size, or do you see it growing?
Yeah. So our org chart obviously has gone through many iterations in the past, 5 years. We actually didn't have a director level until somewhat recently. It was just the COO who was managing all of the sort of manager level folks. So we have clinical supervisors over teams of up to 12 therapists.
Mm.
And then we have a scheduling manager and a billing manager. She was sort of overseeing all those people. And then once we got to 10 teams of therapists, then that didn't make sense anymore because it was too many people for her to manage. And so we added that clinical director layer. But I would say that figuring out, what position do we need to hire for next? Can we afford it? Like those are all difficult things to figure out. Like obviously you need to invest in the business in order to grow and make more money, but then you also are like, but we don't have that money yet, so how are we going to pay this person? So it definitely was something that I leaned a lot on other people who had built businesses, obviously bigger than mine, to sort of
Mhm.
figure out how does this all work, and also my accountant, and that kind of thing. So it was definitely it wasn't always a perfect process, but I think now we have a really great team, and I'm much better now at predicting like when we're going to need a new position and not waiting until it feels like, oh my gosh, we're like burning out these people because they're doing 2 jobs, which has happened in the past.
Just like we don't want the clinicians to burn out, we don't want the leadership team to burn out either.
Yes. Or the admin people. They're very important as well.
No question. No question. So do you see the leadership team expanding, presuming you still intend to grow the practice, or do you think it remains about the same?
I think something that we're looking to do more of is create directors over types of programs. So for example, we just this week have formed a eating disorder program. We have a director over that program. And so I think we're obviously we need to get through this sort of first test of how this is all going to go, but then we're going to most likely continue doing that type of thing. Like we may have an EMDR program or, whatever the case may be. But I think that's the direction that we're going in so that we're more specialized.
Yeah. I think increasingly clients are getting more sophisticated and requesting
Mhm.
specific services, requesting specific types of support.
Yes.
As I think about the broader landscape, it's interesting. I am seeing a lot of generalist group practices just struggling to distinguish themselves from others. And so, to the extent that you can specialize, but also offer a variety of specialties in the same place, a client can benefit from a much higher quality of care. I think that's part of the future of group practice, a big part of the future of group practices.
I think so too. And like what they're doing in my area now is they're embedding, mental health professionals in primary care practices that are part of, bigger health systems. And so they, maybe they're seeing them for a general issue for 3 or 6 sessions. And then if they still need therapy, they're referring them out for something more specialized. So I think, yeah, that is the way to go, really focusing on those specialties.
Primary care integration has been a sort of up and down journey where there was a phase where it happened in sort of certain parts of the country for a time. And I'm hoping that it then went a bit dormant. And I'm hoping that it kind of reemerges as the post-pandemic healthcare system takes shape, because the reality is the mind and the body are so intertwined, and we need different types of healthcare clinicians, different types of healthcare practitioners to build relationships with each other so that they can provide deeper work with patients. So I hope it comes back. We're huge fans over here.
Yeah, I think it definitely has its purpose and can be great for a lot of people as like a
Yeah.
first step.
Do you find how is it working for you from a business perspective? Are you noticing that there's an opportunity to I would say achieve some really strong business results through primary care integration?
Yeah, it's interesting. Here, it seems like the health systems are very like closed off to referring out, even though they're full and they have a big waiting list.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like they'll still just want to keep those clients in house, which is frustrating. So I think, on a surface level, if it is working how it should, which is you see that person for 3 sessions and then refer them out into the community, it would be great. But they don't seem to be doing that.
Yeah, I think the reality is it's just not a fit for every medical institution, and some
Mhm.
are more open, some are a bit more willing to work with mental health organizations, and you really do have to find the right ones to make it work, because like anything else in business, it's a negotiation, and the frame through which it happens matters a lot. You want to be able to shape that. So not every institution, even if they do refer to you, is going to be the right fit, is going to treat you well. So just like you want to treat your clinicians well, you want your strategic partners to treat you well, and you want to treat them well. But if they start off on the wrong foot, then it's just hard.
Yeah, definitely.
So longer term, it sounds like you're exploring different areas of specialty, which is super interesting. Do you see anything else shifting? Do you see move forward continuing to grow, or do you sort of like the size where it is now and feel it's well positioned today?
I think we still have some physical space available to add more clinicians. So I think we're going to continue to grow a bit bigger. Something else we're working on is really trying to develop as many private contracts as we can outside of insurance payers because we're so dependent on insurance. So we're right now exploring setting up collaborations with direct primary care doctors. We're also looking at getting contracts with employers who are self-funded through insurance. So they have a lot more latitude with who to choose to contract with for their insurance benefits. So that's something I'm very excited about. And then I think that is going to go a long way for the sustainability of the practice and just diversifying our payer sources.
Payer diversification is exceptionally important because you just never know exactly what each payer will do. And some of them have incentives that just aren't often super consistent with your own. So carving out that independence is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And yeah, I'm a big fan of practice owners getting creative and thinking about, all right, how can I bring in revenue independent of Aetna, Cigna, and friends?
Yes, absolutely.
As we come towards the end of our time together, we love to end on a human note here. And so when you're not growing your practice, what do you do for fun, Alison?
Great question. I have 3 boys and I love spending time with them. We love to travel, even if it's just a little adventure in our own town. I love to, exploring and trying new things. And so anytime I can, you know, we can have a little adventure together, then that makes me happy.
Where do you want to travel next?
Well, if you ask my kids, they want to go everywhere. I am considering taking them to Sweden next summer. I actually have relatives who live in Sweden, like distant relatives of my great grandmother and great grandfather. So we'd really like to take them to Sweden to meet their distant relatives.
It sounds like a beautiful trip to do when the time is right. Allison, thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing your growth journey and sharing a lot of, I think, valuable nuggets for people. So it is very much appreciated.
Thank you.